Now this is a story all about how black people's sense turned upside down. Just sit right there, I'll tell you why we want tatties over spares. All over Africa, mad and phased, in the meadows where we would spend most of our days, chilling out, maxing, watching the bulls, tilling the land, sometimes having some jewels, when a couple of guys, they were up to no good, started causing trouble in our neighborhoods. Yes, the white man came and we were unprepared. They said, we were better than you, but some of you are ahead. Yes, guys, the story is Caucasians landed on our shores and started shifting things around. Gold, bodies, even standards of beauty. They shifted things around more than Anto Sizayokaya, who just does too much. Like, why is the remote in the room divider? And Auntie, I put those magazines under my bed for a reason, man. Fast forward 2 years later, South Africa is branded as a nation known for its diverse groups of people and its inclusivity, being dubbed the Rainbow Nation because of that. Njani. When racial divide still exists, Nje, what Rainbow Nation is in disharmony with itself? We can't even get along amongst ourselves as black people. We fought together against apartheid, and after we won, we all started fighting like a band whose members who all thought they'd be more successful if they went solo. We all know how that would turn out though. These days, the Twitter streets joke about how there's actually a lot that divides us as black people. And sometimes it's innocent fun, but it can often escalate, much like a game of 30 seconds. Like, that's why your father left you! Whoa, babe. Yes guys, this is Black Twitter. I'm your host Ebenhaezer Dibakwane, and today, we discuss tribalism. Aye. So, what is tribalism? Okay, Gcinuhlanga, ne? Tribalism is the attitude and practice of harboring such a strong feeling of loyalty or bonds to one's tribe that one excludes or even demonizes other tribes that do not belong to that group. You know, like how Xhosa women say Zulus aren't real men because they don't circumcise, or how Zulu people say that Swati sounds like a baby trying to speak isiZulu, or how Swati people say that, well, we're not even sure what they say because no one can understand them. What's actually crazy is that a lot of you could have understood me without the subtitles. You see, if we took moments to learn a little about each other, we'd recognize how baseless and outright childish tribalism is. In fact, let's do some learning right now.
This Human Rights Day, we ask why, after 23 years of democracy, is it that we as black South Africans continue to perpetuate derogative stereotypes amongst each other? Although most of these stereotypes are circulated in the name of humor, on a more serious note, we've heard stories of real lives being affected due to acts of tribalism. Kumnandi masihleka ngokuthi amaZulu anenkani noma sixoxa ngokuthi uma uthandana nowesimame womXhosa kumele ubhekisise uwallet wakho. But have we ever really thought of how these stereotypes began and how they truly affect those whom they are associated with?
In a South African context, we experience tribalism in different ways, especially in the metropolitan cities where there's a larger mix of tribes occupying the same space, a quota of people, if you were. But before we get into that, let's take a look at how tribalism came to be such a defining factor of SA culture. When we go back far enough to see how tribalism came to be in South Africa, we see that it begins with the story of the Bantu expansion. You see, this was one of the major demographic movements in human prehistory sweeping much of the African continent during the 2nd and 1st millennia BC. Bantu-speaking communities reached southern Africa from the Congo Basin as early as the 4th century BC and entered Khoikhoi territory, forcing the original inhabitants to move to more arid areas. They inhabited the vast savanna, you know, before Xhosa women made it their drink of choice. But as you know, there's no history lesson in any South African topic without a sprinkling of apartheid, and this one is no different. It can still be argued that the forceful removals, which targeted the formation of Bantustans in the late 1960s, played a role in ensuring that organized tribalism becomes a brand that will exist for as long as people are still separated. Side note, it was this forceful removal of black ethnic groups that also paved the way for the whites to have their land designated for their own exclusive use, something the EFF directs a lot of their PR to. This and Chuchu's burgeoning DJing career. Back on topic. There is also enough evidence that South Africa had been and still is a divided country, not only along racial lines, but even in tribal or ethnic groupings. You see, for the apartheid regime to succeed, tribalism was a tool that ensured black people were divided and placed in tribal zones. Verwoerd's infamously implemented divide and conquer. This became a fertile ground for racism, which ensured that South Africans are really divided, black people even more so. The fact that racism used tribalism amongst other instruments to ensure that South Africans were divided so one race could oppress another demands that tribalism is also addressed when the bigger picture of racial division is to be overcome. Tribalism cannot be innocent if we truly want reconciliation in this country. It must be recognized as a senior-ism, this thing. Tribalism is to racism what Alfred Ntombela is to Leon Schuster, a giggling accomplice to a slew of damaging shenanigans. One of the most important things for colonists in South Africa was to deepen the differences between the very similar Zulus and Xhosas, Ndebeles and Vendas, Tswanas and Sotos. These differences benefited the elite because it caused conflict. Like the high levels of violence between the Zulu and Xhosa ANC supporters in Natal in 1992. There were well over 1,100 people killed during the first few months of that year. Between people who supported the same party, literally serving the same cause, crabs in a bucket. These were the early signs of how tribalism would insidiously work its way into politics and democracy. Tribal politics continue to derail development and frustrate reconciliation and reconstruction in many African countries to this day. The movie Hotel Rwanda depicts a genocide wrought largely because colonists saw division between two tribes, the Hutus and the Tutsis, who were, and you could have never guessed it, Bantu-speaking people, bro. In SA, certain politicians have often fed their associates, even let their own children benefit from the corrupt deeds that we read about and hear about on a daily basis. I mean, we are used to the corruption thing, but this nepotism thing now, it's too much. Former President Thabo Mbeki was quoted as saying, when a minister comes from a certain region, so will the officials in that department. They conspire in one language, and this is one of the challenges we need to address. When the ANC was formed 102 years ago, part of its mandate was to bury the demon of tribalism. But 102 years later, tribalism is showing its ugly head. After his speech, Thabo's father, Governor Mbeki, was like, "Ayi bethile chap, samba so conspiration no kholihlahla."